is there hope mainly in the rural people, the pink people, and not this urban neo-colonialist? And if so, what can we do about it? Because you suggested the future intellectuals, convey the message to the urban masses. But how about the rural people?
Yeah. In a sense, there is a serious problem in the way in which I continued to mention the urban population more than the rural one. Both peoples are central. The reason I continue to refer to urban more is that my reading is that the pressures for change towards democratic forms are likely to come more from urban areas in the coming future than from rural areas. The centrality of movement struggles are shifting in third world countries from the rural to the urban, which doesn't mean that rural doesn't remain important. It still remains important because in majority of countries that is still the majority of the population. Both have to be spoken to, thought about equally. But to come back, I and you can't really speak to them. One of the failures of the left in the Muslim world lies in what this gentleman was saying. The failure to develop a language that would make sense to a people who are born in and have grown up in an Islamic civilization. You cannot turn your back on that. You see, change takes roots when it brings something new, but that new is congruent, it's in harmony with, it harks back to, it invokes the memory of the old also. It's in that congruence of the new and the old that lie the deep, real seeds of change. And that's one of the things we have to do. You wanted to pick at somebody else?
I have a question. You mentioned about the impediments in way of democracy in the Muslim world. In one of the impediments you mentioned was claiming the warrior class.
Warrior.
What do you suggest? How can they be changed to make them part of the democratic process, or track them like in Egypt or Algeria? And the second question is, you talked about the failure of the Islamic movements, and you give the example of Iran. The only two examples of the Islamic movement that have reached power are Iran and Sudan. And as soon as they reach to power, they face the hostile treatment by the international community. They impose sort of embargoes and sanctions. So for that reason, they are doing quite poorly economically. So how can we conclude that these movements have failed?
I'm glad you raised the question because it was on my mind when I was talking. The first part of your question was the warrior class. Yes, I got it, I remember. A complex answer which I will not go into. I can only take off some pointers. The most important factor in taming of the warrior class has been throughout history the legitimacy and legitimation of the civilian process. Now, in our time, the civilian process can be legitimated only by a deeper, more lively connection between civil society and politics and political society. And that connection has to be anti-militarist. If we do not develop an anti-militarist popular outlook, we will not be able to tame the warrior class. Second thing it requires very much is honest, capable, I wouldn't even say honest so much, capable leadership with a modicum of integrity. See, no goddamn Pakistani soldier would have dared to stand up to Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Couldn't have dared to stand up to Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Bhutto at the beginning, when his promise was that of good leadership, literally in one occasion stretched his shoes, but those were the idiocies that got him in trouble. Stretched his shoe for Ziaul Haq to clean it. And Ziaul Haq pulled out his handkerchief and did it. So quality of leadership is very important. Military always moves when civilian political class has exhausted and discredited itself with the people. You remember I said during my lecture that I think that in Pakistan the military is not about to move. I said that in spite of my feeling that our leaders are mucking it up the best they could. They are just as bad as they could be. But something else has happened. Civil society has come to life in Pakistan. Our press is not only free, it is lively. It's a strong press. By God, it's a good press. And it speaks out on issues. People are unhappy, but they are not saying we wish a soldier will take over. They are saying next time we're going to throw her out. We'll elect another one. See, they are according legitimacy to a democratic process. That's when the warrior class will worry. Partial answer to your very good question. Any other?
Right at the back.
Like my observation is, like through our Islamic history, we've been looking up to the ruler, and we rely on the goodness of this ruler, either move us forward or backward. And I go frequently to the Middle East, particularly to the Arab countries, and I talk to the intelligentsia and to the working people, and what I observe, these people try to find excuses for their ruler. In other words, they blame the other. If they have a corrupt ruler, they say, oh yeah, he's pressured by the Americans. He can't do otherwise. It's dictated to him by so and so. So unless the attitude of these people change and not find excuses for their rulers, it will be very hard to change the system. And we're talking about the educated people, trying to find excuses for these rulers, and they don't try to change. So how can we educate the people in the Muslim world to somehow adopt, some kind of democracy as we know it, like in this country, and thereby have the change in the Arab policy?
Well, first of all, from the main premise of your statement, I totally agree with. But I would like to underline that educating the people is much harder when you live in an authoritarian system. See, today, Pakistan is a democracy of sorts. So is Bangladesh, so is Jordan, so is Turkey. But in all these places, except Turkey to a certain extent, the two main vehicles of educating people, of communication, radio and television, are still controlled by the government. So that there is a certain denial to civil society to educate itself. But I agree with your main point, and that reminds me to also say something about the second half of your question, namely both Iran and Sudan are facing hostile powers. I made my assessment of Iran, and I would say the same thing about Sudan, keeping in mind the difficulties of facing a hostile power. China faced hostile power for 30 years, more hostile than anything the Iranians are facing. Iran is a smaller country, bigger resources, higher literacy, bigger intelligentsia. Some of the failure is internal. It's just internal.
Mr. Ahmed, I want to thank you very much. Twitching and turning, you said a lot of things that made me think. And as someone who has a connection, and one of these people you're talking about, maybe on one side of this apartheid, what I guess it's going to be a bit contorted, what I'm going to try to say.
Go ahead.
I'm trying to think through this because it's something I do think about a lot. What I find problematic is that in terms of a connection to homeland, if you want to call it that, I find there's a lack of clarity, of vision, of what we should be wanting from the homeland per se, and I'm wondering if maybe in your thoughts you could expand on that a bit in terms of actual concrete plan of sorts, or plans.
I cannot completely answer your question. Have you all heard the question? Yeah. Those of us who care about our homelands and our people, what is the best way to connect with them, to help them? Is that correct? I'm giving a summary.
Yeah.
Okay. One long question, I can't answer all of it, but I would say make one major statement. Contribute that which you have. Think in terms of what you have to give and give that. Okay? 30 engineers in Chicago inviting Maulana Israr Ahmed and giving him $30,000, they're not helping anybody. If those 30 engineers had gotten together and picked out a school whose engineering program they will help develop, they would have done a major support for that country. You see what I'm trying to say to you? I feel like I'm just about to do a plug. It has been 4 years for me. It has been a very hard battle. For 4 years I'm engaged in, I'm saying it in a good way, you'll see, praising folks like you. I've been engaged in creating a university in Pakistan. It has been a battle. Okay? It's a massive project. The present government is not terribly helpful for reasons you have understood. I am not helpful myself because I have a habit of saying what I feel. But I've been working at it. And you know, it has been extraordinary to see how people, educated people obviously, have really dug in to help me. I have had letters from Saudi Arabia, from Kuwait, from Nigeria, from America, from Canada. People are writing. They read it in the newspapers. Pakistani newspapers have praised it a lot, and a lot of international attention will be given. What is it called? The Chronicle of Higher Education did a long story on it, and so on and so forth. So people have seen it, and people are helping. For God's sake, this group of people, I would love your help. It's not just money. I want your skill. Of course, if you are rich, give me money also. I won't refuse money. But your skills are as important. Collect books for it. Send the books. Ship them. I'm not saying just for me. Anything. Make a project. The other day I was speaking last week at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. A group of Bengali students have done this marvelous thing from Bangladesh. They have chosen 3 schools in Bangladesh. They said these are our sister schools. We are going to raise money, collect books, bring teachers, train them, do what we can. These are our 3 schools. It's a small job. They look very diffident to me. He said, okay, Dr. Saab, this is a small thing we are doing, but is it all right? Do you think it will help? I said, this is the best thing you can do. You can't do anything better. What I'm saying to you is connect, not abstractly. Connect concretely, give that which you can give best, and we will figure out the rest. Professor Alvi.
Yes, sir. I am in the mood to enter into sort of discussion that we used to have during 1958-59 when we were together. Unfortunately, we don't have the time. What I would like to know is democracy leads to some social development, and social development leads to democracy. Under the present circumstances, is it possible and even desirable to have democracy, especially the Western type of democracy in these countries? And would that lead to social development?
Is the question clear?
Yeah.
Very, very excellent question, Shafiq. I'm tempted to speak concretely on this issue. I think, number one, yes, social development leads to democracy, and democracy contributes to social development. What I should have done more clearly than I have done was to have argued that we have reached that point of social development and economic condition from where it would be difficult for us to go much further without democratic forms. The primary bottleneck, for example, I do not know how you feel as an economist, but one of the primary bottlenecks to me in our continued higher rate of economic and social growth, development, is the problem of distributive justice. By distributive justice, I do not mean only the distribution of wealth, but more importantly, distribution of services, education, health, especially of women, literacy, education, skills, housing, infrastructure, distribution of those on some basis of equality. Now, distributive justice will be impossible to attain in our countries unless people have a voice. And unless the leaders who come from different classes are accountable in some way, unless there is a structure of accountability. No accountability, no distributive justice. That's going to be roughly the story. Therefore, democracy has become essential at this stage of our development. Allow me one more comment on that line, just one more. When you have a democratic system, by which you said I haven't defined it, by which I meant a system of government, no matter what its form is, in which freedom of press, speech and association is a norm. It's a legalized, constitutionally given norm. That's one of the. That's the one at the moment I'm going to use. There are other things to be definition. The representation of power, access to government, blah, 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 etc. But if you take just the question of freedom, look at any of the countries that have experienced a small amount of democracy. Pakistan in the last 5 years, Bangladesh in the last 8 years, Jordan in the last 4, 5 years, 6 years. Small amounts of it. What it has done is, it has brought civil society into life. I mean, we have at the moment in Pakistan, for the first time in my memory, in 50 years, issues are being debated publicly. For the first time, Idi Trust's project was relatively small in 1987. It started to expand, flower, when there was freedom to flower. I couldn't have thought of starting Khaldunia because I couldn't even go back. It was impossible to go back and come out. Ziaullah's formula was very nice. Let him come in. He can't go out. Simple. So once you have freedom, it produces a set of creativities which are unpredictable. And we have reached that point. We must have it. Yeah.
Professor Ahmed, thank you very much. I was listening to you, and I did not listen to a Muslim scholar when you were talking in global terms. And most of Muslim intellectuals who claim to be Muslim intellectuals, they view democracy as you know, a form of government. But Muslim thinkers also believe, great number of them, that there is an Islamic form of government. Shura, Bay'ah, not necessarily Western-style democracy. And in your touching on the issue of prospects of democracy in the Islamic world, don't you see a connection between democracy as a virtue in global terms and for the Muslims to claim it as their own, as precedence before it becomes a fact of life in the Muslim countries?
Yeah, I'm afraid that I've totally